Hey guys, Technivorous here. What if I told you that with these simple items you could drastically improve the consistency of your extrusion, prevent pretty much all clogging, and altogether have less trouble with your hot end? This is something known around the internet as Luke's hot end fix, but I found his documentation not very direct, so not only have I simplified the procedure, but I've also designed a sturdier tool from the ground up for easier, straighter cuts of the Bowden tube, and the hot end tool and spacer required are available on Thingiverse at the link below. So let's dive right into the Technivorous hot end fix. First of all, you are going to need some Bowden tube. You can use the piece that is already with your machine because the two pieces combined will be the same length as the original piece. What we're basically going to do is nip the tip, cut a piece off. That's what the tool's for. It'll measure it to the exact size, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. We're going to place that into the hot end, and then we're going to place the spacer at the top of the hot end. So the important thing here is this I have done with PLA. I have used it with PLA for months now and not had any issues. If you feel the need to print it in something sturdier, go ahead, but really it's a non-plus. You should never get heat creep towards the end of the hot end that we're going to be placing this at. So, show you how to cut this piece properly here. Alright, I do want to point out, if you're going to be using the existing one that's already on your machine, you're going to want to disconnect both ends. Don't try cutting it without removing it because it's just not as easily maneuverable. And what you're going to want to do is try to pull this end as straight as possible. And then you're just going to feed it through the hole here. It should just basically sit in that channel and butt up against the back end. And you're going to place your finger on it to hold it in place. Make sure that it's in there snug, and you're going to get your straight blade and carefully, not to slice your finger, pop it in there and just give it a cut. And there you have your piece. It'll either fall right out or you can slide it back out the tube. So a little thread there, but as you can see, we have a fairly straight cut. Now that we have our Bowden piece that we need to make sure that we've also printed our spacer, and we will go over to the printer and do the necessary adjustments. As you can see, the last thing I printed here was my tool. I'm going to go over to Kira monitor mode. I am hooked up to my Ender 3 right now, so I'm going to go ahead and hit preheat on the hot end to get it up to 220 because we're going to unload the filament, and then we will have to remove the nozzle, and doing that requires me to get at the hot end, which means I'm also going to have to take my fan cover off. So I'll show you that now, and we'll get to the guts of this fix. Alright, so one of the main concerns here with the original hot end fix, and the reason that I'm doing mine a little bit differently, concerns the Bowden tube being lined up with the throat of the hot end and actually seating properly up against the nozzle, because if that's not done correctly, you will have leakages, you will have problems with this fix. So the first thing we're going to do is go and move axis, and we are going to bring up the Z axis we'll get it up into view here, that way we can look up underneath there, and that'll help us to see that we're properly seated with the Bowden tube. So yes, I know my fans are very nasty. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this right now, because we're going to take them apart and clean those as well. I have to get them off to get to the hot end. You'll also notice I don't have a sock on here right now. I honestly haven't had any problems running it without a sock at all, so I do have a couple laying around. I don't have the proper adhesive at the moment to get it to stay on there, so I've kind of just been running without it. Haven't really been having any issues, so we're going to go ahead and start disassembling now. Alright, here we go. As you saw when I was in Kira, I did heat this up, so Alright, we've got the fans off. Next is this duct here. Alright, we have the duct here. It's important to keep in mind when removing the duct that we do have the hot end heated right now because we're about to take out the nozzle. Alright, that is, I think, more acceptable there. We're going to go ahead and unload the filament. Give it a little push and then a pull. It's not going to reach there, so I'm just going to wind it to here for now. Alright, now the next thing we need to do is to release the Bowden tube. Now we don't want to cool it down yet at this point because we need to be able to pass something through there. Alright, that is, I think, more acceptable there. We're going to go ahead and unload the filament. Give it a little push and then a pull. It's not going to reach there, so I'm just going to wind it to here for now. Alright, now the next thing we need to do is to release the Bowden tube. Now we don't want to cool it down yet at this point because we need to be able to pass something through there. Alright, once you've pressed down on your release and decoupled your Bowden tube, you're going to want to take your largest wrench, unscrew the Bowden coupler, and remove that. And this is actually where a lot of people run into trouble. Feeding that longer Bowden tube through there is not usually a problem because you have more leverage. Once you get to the little piece you actually need to insert, people get it down just a little bit and they drop their washer in there and then they grab their connector here. And you can use that to push down a little bit, but basically if you do that and then screw it in, you're going to ensure that it's seated up against this side right here, which means it's touching here. That doesn't necessarily mean it's down here up against the throat where it needs to be. And if there's a gap between the throat and the Bowden tube, or the nozzle in the Bowden tube, it's going to leak out and it's going to create a leak possibly from up here, or it's going to cause extrusion problems down here, which negates the whole purpose of doing this. So I'm going to make sure that I put it in properly, and then I'll show you what I mean by that. Basically what I did was I braced it here and inserted the largest Allen wrench in there, flat side, not round side, and pushed, and we're in there about as far as we're going to go. Alright, you can see my Bowden tube starting to poke through there. Now I'm going to align the nozzle, get that seated up against the throat, and then I will give it one more final push down to make sure that it's properly seated before we screw the top back on. So I've yet to screw this all the way back down. I got it about halfway in there, and then I placed my Bowden tube in, pushed until I'm sure that the tip of this Bowden tube is up against the washer. That's what's going to keep it from pulling away, separating, causing any gaps down in the hot end where you have your heat. The heat creep, like I said, should never really reach up here, so that shouldn't be an issue. I have it where I want it. I'm going to go ahead and tighten it down here. It will start to twist the Bowden tube a little bit. You don't want that. You want your Bowden tube to be as straight as possible because it causes torsion on the inside of the tube against the filament if it's turned and it tries to twist the filament. So once you have it sufficiently tight, and you'll know because it won't turn anymore, again, you don't want to over tighten it, but once you have it sufficiently tight, this tab here should no longer push down when it's, oh, I gotta pop it out, and it's still pushing down, so that tells me I got a little bit of play here. So I'm going to tighten this up the rest of the way. Alright, so there you have it. This is post hot end fix, just as a real test real quick here. I'm going to put the filament back in and we will extrude a little bit before we print something. Alright, we're all back together now. We're going to go ahead and go to do a little test here and make sure we're extruding little bit higher temperature than I'm supposed to be at for this PLA, so it's just kind of oozing out of there. But move axis, 1mm extruder, and there you can hear it going. And we seem to be extruding just fine. So now let's put everything back together and we'll wrap this up. Alright, so there you have it. That's the Technivorous hot end fixed. We're all wrapped up. Everything's put back together and we are ready to rock and roll. So I'm going to go ahead and get working on the next video, guys. We are going to be calibrating the E-steps and flow rate, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, all things considered, after this mod right here, you should definitely have a lot more consistent print quality. If you have any issues with it printing or not printing, you need to first check that your PTFE tube is level with the heat break and seated up against the nozzle. You don't want any gaps there, and you especially don't want it sticking out below the heat break, which will cause a large gap between the nozzle and the heat break and will cause burning, oozing, and some serious heat creep, and we don't want that. So as long as it's installed properly, this should keep you from jamming up with pretty much any filament you want to print in there that is that the Ender 3 is capable of printing. I've successfully printed coffee filament out of here with no problem, a couple of wood filaments, and had no clogs, which is surprising, seeing as how prior to doing the fix I had quite a few clogs with particulate laced filament. So that's going to be it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching. And as always, guys, I am Technivorous. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button. You can subscribe right here by clicking on the icon. And I put a couple videos up in the corner. One of them is going to be my latest video, my latest upload, and the other one is going to be what YouTube recommends for you. So feel free to check those out. Don't forget to hit that bell for notifications down below, and we'll see you guys next time.